Welcome to Boring History for Sleep, where you sink into the pillow while the past politely looks the other way. You pressed his face into the grave mud and told the priest you found him that way. If these sleepy histories have helped you rest, you can like, subscribe, and leave a comment. Once again, as always, thank you for keeping this little channel alive. Tell me where you are and what time it is on your clock. I am awake with you. Tonight you are the gravedigger in a plague-struck town, shoveling lime by torchlight and counting coins that smell like incense and earth. You rob the fresh dead for scholars, trade dogma for anatomy, and help push superstition towards science one stolen body at a time. Close your eyes. Listen to my voice. Feel the warm sheets and the waiting silence. Let your breath slow as the fire crackles. Notice how the pull of sleep feels like sinking into soft soil you've already turned. Now the air is resin and smoke, torchlight licking stone, rough wool at your wrists, the iron bite of a spade, the chalk sting of lime. You choose which body to lift, which truth to hide, and the last thing you cover tonight is not the grave, but your tracks. Picture, if you will, the pre-dawn chill of a medieval churchyard, where lantern light flickers over mounds of loose soil like a drunkard's promise. The frost has painted everything silver, though not the precious kind, more the colour of old disappointment. Here, among the crooked headstones that lean like gossiping neighbours, we meet our unnamed gravedigger, shovel in one hand, stale bread in the other, muttering that at least the dead don't haggle over prices. His breakfast consists of yesterday's crust, hard enough to chip teeth, which he gnaws while surveying his domain of decay. Strange fact, the living pay him in coin that jingles with false cheer, the corpses pay him in silence that weighs more than gold. Both currencies, he notes, spend poorly at the tavern. The morning fog creeps between the graves like unpaid debts, and our digger sets to work with the enthusiasm of a man who's discovered that job security means everyone else's insecurity. He inspects yesterday's mass grave, a communal accommodation that would horrify modern city planners, but delights the worms. The frost crystals have etched patterns on exposed jawbones, creating what he calls poor man's jewellery, nature's way of dressing up the underdressed. A femur pokes through the soil at a jaunty angle, as if waving hello, or perhaps goodbye. With bones it's hard to tell the difference. He notes with professional interest that the grave has settled unevenly overnight, creating divots where the bodies have begun their slow collapse into themselves. The church bells toll 6 times, each clang bouncing off tombstones like a metallurgic migraine. Father Benedict emerges from the vestry, his robes billowing with self-importance and last night's wine fumes. "Faster digging," the priest demands, wagging a finger that's seen more holy water than soap. Sunrise brings worshippers who'd rather not trip over half-buried elbows during morning prayers. Our gravedigger nods with the practiced patience of a man who's learnt that arguing with clergy is like teaching Latin to livestock, theoretically possible, but practically pointless. The priest's sandals squelch through the mud as he inspects the grounds, occasionally blessing a puddle by accident. The Miller family has purchased a plot near the church wall, Father Benedict announces, as if real estate maintains its value 6 feet under. They expect their grandmother planted by noon with proper depth and drainage. The gravedigger mentally calculates. Proper depth means his back will sing soprano by sunset, and drainage in this clay soil is about as likely as the Pope taking up juggling. Still, he touches his cap in agreement, the universal gesture of your gold, your rules. As the priest retreats to prepare his sermon on the wages of sin, which, ironically, pay better than the wages of grave digging, our protagonist begins the Miller plot. The first strike of spade on earth sends vibrations up his arms, a morning greeting from the underworld. Each shovelful reveals layers of history, pottery shards from Roman times, a tarnished button from someone's Sunday best, and the occasional tooth that grins up at him like a tiny tombstone. The soil here tells stories that the living have forgotten, tales of floods and famines written in sediment. A movement catches his eye, a stray dog, ribs showing through patchy fur, sniffing around the older graves. The mutt has the lean look of a creature that's made peace with disappointment, much like the gravedigger himself. It noses through the disturbed earth near plot 47, where last week's budget burial hadn't quite covered all the necessary real estate. Before our digger can shoo it away, the dog emerges victorious, a severed hand clamped in its jaws like a macabre chew toy. "Takeaway service," the gravedigger mutters, watching the dog trot off with its prize. Even the strays have discovered convenience dining. The sun climbs higher, transforming the frost into mud that sucks at his boots with each step. 3 more holes to dig before the church service, each one a negotiation between stone, root, and the surprising stubbornness of earth that's grown fat on human fertilizer. His shovel strikes something hard, not the familiar clunk of rock, but the hollow thud of wood. Another coffin, older, unmarked, its occupant's name lost to time and cheap burial practices. He digs around it, creating a fresh grave that embraces the old like a guilty secret. By mid-morning, his pit has grown deep enough that he works in his own shadow, the walls of earth rising around him like the world's most depressing amphitheatre. Down here, the smell is different, not the sharp stink of fresh death, but the mouldy perfume of accomplished decomposition. Earthworms writhe away from his shovel, offended by the interruption to their breakfast. A beetle, iridescent green despite its grim diet, scuttles across his boot. He's learned to appreciate these creatures. They're the only ones who never complain about his work. The church bells ring again, calling the faithful to prayer and reminding the gravedigger that time moves differently above ground. He climbs out of the pit, soil cascading from his clothes like a waterfall of mortality. His joints protest with the crack and pop of a skeleton auditioning for a musical career. Above ground, the churchyard has come alive with the irony of the living visiting the dead. Widow Morrison kneels at her husband's grave, talking to the headstone as if it might talk back. The gravedigger has noticed she comes every Tuesday, rain or shine, updating the deceased on grain prices and gossip. 2 plots over, the blacksmith's children play between the graves, their laughter sharp as shattered glass against the morning's solemnity. Their mother watches with the tight smile of someone who's realized that cemeteries make excellent, if morbid, playgrounds. Our digger returns to his work, the rhythm of dig-lift-toss as regular as breathing, and about as exciting. Each shovelful brings him closer to the day's quota, and further from his youth's ambitions. He'd once dreamed of being a carpenter, crafting furniture for the living instead of accommodations for the dead. But plague had taken his master, war had taken his savings, and here he was, a specialist in the only trade that never lacks for customers. Shadow falls across his pit, not the priest this time, but Thomas the tanner, clutching a leather purse. "My mother-in-law," Thomas begins, and the gravedigger already knows this story will end with coins and complicated burial instructions. She wants to be buried facing east, but not too east, with her wedding ring but not her second wedding ring. The gravedigger nods, mental arithmetic calculating the extra effort against the weight of the purse. Thomas drops the coins with the relieved air of a man outsourcing his problems. Also, Thomas adds, already backing away, she insisted on being buried with her cookbook. The gravedigger doesn't ask why. In his profession, he's learned that the dead's requests make about as much sense as the living's, just with less opportunity for argument. He pockets the coins, their weight both comforting and condemning. Every payment is a reminder that his prosperity depends on others' mortality, an economic model that would make philosophers weep and merchants envious. The noon sun beats down, transforming the churchyard into a patchwork of light and shadow. Our gravedigger pauses to wipe sweat from his brow, leaving a streak of mud like a war paint. His morning's work shows in 4 neat rectangles of darkness, each one waiting to swallow someone's story. The Miller grandmother's grave is nearly ready, its walls straight as righteousness and about as forgiving. A commotion near the church doors draws his attention. A funeral procession arriving early, the mourners dressed in their finest black, which in this town means their least patched clothes. The coffin bearers struggle with their load, suggesting either a life well-fed or a carpenter generous with wood. Father Benedict emerges to greet them, his face arranged in professional sorrow that shifts to annoyance when he notices the gravedigger watching. "Back to work," the priest's glare says, and our digger obliges with a mock salute that goes unnoticed. He's learned to read funerals like others read weather. This one has the marks of middling prosperity and genuine grief. The widow doesn't wail too loudly, authentic sorrow is often quieter, and the children look confused rather than relieved, suggesting a parent taken too soon. The mourners will cluster around the grave, drop their flowers and tears, then retreat to the wake, where ale will wash away the taste of mortality. And tomorrow he'll fill in the hole, pack the earth and wait for the next customer. As afternoon shadows lengthen, our gravedigger finishes the last grave with the flourish of a man who's found art in the artless. The sides are smooth, the bottom level, the depth precisely 6 feet, give or take an inch, for subsidence and optimism. He climbs out for the final time today, his body a symphony of aches playing in minor keys. His shovel, faithful companion, leans against a headstone like a drunk friend. The dog from morning returns, apparently unsatisfied with its earlier prize. It sniffs around the fresh graves with the air of a connoisseur, then settles beside the gravedigger with a sigh that speaks of shared understanding. Together they sit, man and beast, watching the sun paint the headstones gold. The dog's tail thumps once against the ground, perhaps in appreciation, perhaps in simple recognition of another creature that makes its living from the dead. Our gravedigger pulls out his bread, now soft from pocket warmth and honest sweat. He tears off a piece for the dog, who accepts it with more gratitude than most humans show. They chew in companionable silence, two scavengers in a world that pretends death doesn't exist until it knocks on the door demanding exact change. The bread tastes of earth and effort, seasoned with the salt of survival. As dusk approaches, painting the sky the colour of old blood, our gravedigger surveys his domain. Tomorrow will bring more bodies, more holes, more coins that weigh heavy in the pocket and light in the soul. The cycle continues, reliable as sunrise and twice as brutal. He leans on his spade, feeling the wood worn smooth by countless hours of grip, and wonders which will break first, his back or the town's thin veil of denial about death. The church bells toll vespers, their bronze voices carrying across the graves like a lullaby for the dead. Somewhere in town, people are being born, living, laughing, loving and dying, all in the time it takes him to dig a proper grave. And tomorrow, some of them will end up here, in his domain of dirt and departure. He stands, joints protesting, and begins the walk home, leaving behind 4 empty graves that won't stay empty long. The dog follows him to the cemetery gate, then stops, as if understanding that some boundaries shouldn't be crossed. Our gravedigger tips his cap to the mutt, one professional to another. The streets beyond beckon with the promise of ale and anonymity, where he can pretend for a few hours that his hands don't smell of earth and endings. But even as he walks away, he knows he'll be back tomorrow, shovel in hand, ready to accommodate the dead with the patience of the professionally damned. The year 1348 arrives like an unwelcome relative, bringing gifts nobody wants and staying far too long. The bells of the church toll without pause now, their bronze tongues wagging with news of the dead, creating a metallic symphony that would drive composers mad. Each clang announces another soul departed, another body requiring our gravedigger's professional attention. The Black Death rolls into town like a fog that coughs, spreading its influence with the democratic fairness of a disaster that doesn't check pedigrees. Our gravedigger wakes to find his workload has tripled overnight, as if death has suddenly discovered the joys of mass production. The town clerk, a thin man who treats ink like gold and words like diamonds, quietly updates the digger's pay in the ledger. The scratching of quill on parchment sounds like fingernails on coffin wood, appropriate given the circumstances. Halfway through the entry, the clerk runs out of ink, stares at the unfinished number and shrugs. A gesture that says, "What's the point of accounting when we're all checking out?" The gravedigger arrives at the churchyard to find a queue of coffins waiting, like parishioners for a particularly popular sermon. They're stacked with the haphazard efficiency of panic, some pine, some oak, one that appears to be mostly hope and hastily hammered boards. Father Benedict stands among them, his face the colour of old parchment, blessing each box with the speed of a baker frosting funeral cakes. "Dig faster," he wheezes, and our gravedigger notes the priest's new wheeze wasn't there yesterday. The first rule of plague grave digging: efficiency trumps ceremony. Our digger abandons individual plots for mass graves, calculating depth versus width with the cold mathematics of mortality. One large pit can hold a dozen bodies if you stack them right, like cordwood for the afterlife's fireplace. He's become an artist of arrangement, fitting corpses together like a macabre jigsaw puzzle where all the pieces are the wrong shape and nobody wins. By torchlight, he works through the night, the flames casting dancing shadows that make the dead seem to twitch. The coffins queue like discount bread at the baker's, if bread came in human-sized loaves and made the baker cry. Some families can afford proper boxes, others wrap their loved ones in sheets that won't be washed again. The wealthy dead arrive in oak caskets with brass fittings that gleam like false promises. The poor come in winding sheets that unwind at inconvenient moments. He develops a system: dig, stack, cover partially, dig deeper, stack more, cover completely. It's architecture in reverse, building down instead of up, creating underground apartments for residents who never complain about the neighbours. His shovel bites into earth that's grown soft with recent disturbance, as if the ground itself has given up resisting. Between layers of bodies, he spreads lime, like a baker dusting flour, except this recipe calls for decomposition control rather than rising bread. The lime burns his hands through the holes in his gloves, creating white patches that look like premature graves on his skin. He's learned to shovel it while reciting half-remembered prayers, multitasking faith and pest control with the efficiency of the damned. Ash to ashes, dust to dust, lime to corpses, because we must, becomes his working mantra. The Latin prayers Father Benedict insists on sound more like incantations now, magic words trying to hold back a tide of infected flesh. The merchant approaches at midnight, gold coins clutched in a perfumed handkerchief. "My wife," he gasps through the cloth. "She deserves sacred ground near the church wall." The gravedigger recognizes the universal language of bribery, spoken with the accent of desperation. Sacred ground fills fast these days, prime real estate for the posthumous, where proximity to the church supposedly guarantees better afterlife accommodations. "The wool plots are full," our digger lies smoothly, then pauses for dramatic effect. But perhaps something could be arranged for the right donation to the church's maintenance fund. The merchant's coins change hands faster than plague changes victims, and suddenly a space appears near the coveted wall. It's amazing how flexible sacred ground becomes when lubricated with gold, like holy water mixed with commerce. More villagers arrive, as word spreads of his willingness to negotiate. They bribe him for priority seating in the better sections, as if death maintains a class system. The baker wants his mother buried facing the sunrise. The tanner insists his brother avoid the boggy lower section. Our gravedigger pockets coins with numb irony, each transaction a dark comedy where everyone's the punchline. He's become a combination of undertaker, urban planner, and confessor to the desperate. People tell him things they wouldn't tell priests, bargaining for better burial spots with stories and silver. The blacksmith's widow admits she's glad her husband's dead. The plague did what she couldn't. The mayor's son begs for his mistress to be buried near his family plot, but not too near, maintaining discretion even in death. Between negotiations, he returns to digging, his shovel working with metronomic persistence. The pile of waiting bodies grows faster than he can excavate, a macabre race between death and dirt. Some corpses arrive with strange marks, buboes like black eggs under the skin, weeping sores that leak even after life has left. He's learned not to look at faces anymore. They all wear the same expression anyway, surprise mixed with relief. His assistant, young William, works beside him with the enthusiasm of someone who hasn't yet realized this job has no happy endings. The boy chatters while he digs, nervous words filling the silence between shovel strikes. "My mother says the plague comes from bad air," William offers, pausing to wipe his nose. "Your mother's half right," the gravedigger responds, "though the air's not bad until we start digging." They work in rhythm, two shovels biting earth in alternating beats. William tells jokes he's heard at the tavern, gallows humour that's found its natural habitat. "Why did the plague cross the road?" the boy asks, then answers his own question. "To get to the other side, along with everyone else." The gravedigger chuckles despite himself. Humour, like plague, is contagious. Midnight passes, marked by church bells that have given up counting individual deaths. Now they simply ring continuously, a bronze announcement that yes, people are still dying, thank you for asking. The torches burn low, replaced with fresh ones that hiss and spit like angry cats. In the dancing light, the churchyard looks like a battlefield where earth is losing to mortality. A rat scurries past, fat and glossy with good living. The gravedigger notes its healthy appearance. The rats thrive while humans wither, nature's way of keeping score. William tries to hit it with a clod of earth but misses, the rat disappearing into a crack in the church wall. "Leave it," the gravedigger advises. "It's got its own work to do." The pile of bodies requires organisation, and our digger has become a filing clerk for the dead. This corner for confirmed plague victims, that section for natural deaths, though the distinction grows muddy as the night wears on. Some families insist their loved ones died of anything but plague. Old age, weak hearts, excessive praying. He accommodates their delusions with the patience of someone who knows denial is just another stage of grief. A fight breaks out near the cemetery gates, two families arguing over who arrived first. The gravedigger watches them squabble over queue position for the dead, wondering if this is how humanity ends, not with dignity, but with petty arguments over burial order. Father Benedict attempts to mediate, his words lost in the shouting match. Finally, exhaustion wins where reason failed, and both families retreat to opposite corners to glare at each other. William begins to flag, his shoveling rhythm breaking down like a clock losing time. The boy leans heavily on his spade, face flushed even in the cold night air. "Just tired," he insists, but the gravedigger recognizes the look. He's seen it on too many faces lately. The boy's forehead burns with fever when checked, skin hot as forge-heated metal. "Go home," the gravedigger orders, but William shakes his head stubbornly. "Need the coins," the boy protests, even as his legs wobble like a newborn colt's. They continue working, but William's movements grow increasingly erratic, his shovel strikes missing more than hitting. Finally, mid-swing, the boy collapses, folding like a letter delivering bad news. The gravedigger catches him before he hits the ground, feeling the fever rage through the boy's clothes. William's eyes roll back, showing whites like tiny graves, and his breathing comes in rattles that sound like dice in a cup. A digger lays him gently aside, noting with grim efficiency that this saves walking time. One less wage to pay, one more burial to perform. The economics of plague are simple. Everyone's a customer, eventually. He covers William with a spare shroud from the pile, the boy's personal transition from employee to inventory. There's no time for sentiment. The dead keep arriving like a dinner party where everyone's invited, but nobody wants to attend. He returns to digging alone now, his shovel working double time to make up for the lost hands. Each strike into earth feels heavier, as if the ground has absorbed some of William's weight. Dawn arrives like a grey apology, illuminating a churchyard transformed into a warehouse of mortality. The neat rows of old graves have been replaced by excavations that look like giant mouths, ready to swallow whatever's fed to them. Our gravedigger counts the night's work. 6 large pits, each containing multiple residents, in Death's new communal housing project. His hands are blistered even through the gloves, and his back screams protests in languages that haven't been invented yet. Father Benedict returns with the morning light, looking like he's aged a decade overnight. The priest's new wheeze has developed into a full cough, productive and ominous. He blesses the mass graves with the abbreviated ceremony that's become standard, holy water sprinkled like seasoning on a dish nobody ordered. "How many?" the priest asks, and the gravedigger shrugs. Counting individuals seems pointless when death deals in bulk. The day shift arrives. Other diggers recruited from failed farms and closed shops. They nod at our gravedigger with the recognition of fellow members in an exclusive club nobody wants to join. Together they'll continue the work, turning the churchyard into a honeycomb of holes. But for now, our gravedigger heads home, leaving William's body for the others to process. He walks through empty streets, shops shuttered like eyes that don't want to see. The few people abroad hurry past with cloths pressed to faces, as if death can be filtered like bad wine. A dog howls somewhere, long and mournful, perhaps mourning a master who won't be coming home. Or perhaps, like the gravedigger, it simply recognizes the sound of a world reshaping itself, one corpse at a time. At his lodgings he strips outside, burning his clothes in a barrel kept for the purpose. The smoke rises black and greasy, carrying the smell of lime and mortality skyward. He washes with water cold enough to make his teeth chatter, scrubbing skin that never feels clean anymore. His landlady leaves food outside his door, bread and ale, the breakfast of champions and gravediggers. Sleep comes hard, filled with dreams of endless pits and falling bodies. In his nightmares, he digs, but the holes fill themselves, earth vomiting up corpses faster than he can bury them. He wakes to afternoon bells tolling new deaths, the sound pulling him from bed like puppet strings. Time to return to work, to dig more holes for more bodies in a town that's becoming one large cemetery. He dresses in fresh clothes that will be burned tomorrow, collects his shovel like a soldier retrieving his weapon. The coins from last night weigh heavy in his purse, each one paid for with someone's tragedy. But gold is gold whether it comes from commerce or corpses, and his landlady doesn't ask questions when the rent's paid on time. He heads back to the churchyard, where death waits with the patience of a customer who knows the shop never closes. The cycle continues: dig, bury, collect, repeat. Our gravedigger has become wealthy by the standards of a dying town, his purse fattening as the population thins. Its supply and demand reduced to its most basic transaction. He supplies holes, death demands filling them. The irony isn't lost on him that he's never been more prosperous or more miserable. As he enters the churchyard for another night's work, he passes the spot where William fell. Someone has already buried the boy, probably in one of the mass graves he helped dig. There's poetry in that, or perhaps just the prose of practicality. Our gravedigger offers a brief nod of acknowledgement, then picks up his shovel to continue the only growth industry in a town that's dying by degrees. Whispers travel through the taverns like smoke through rafters, carrying tales that would make honest men check their burial contracts. Scholars in the big cities, they say, will pay gold for fresh corpses, pay enough to make a gravedigger reconsider his professional ethics. The church thunders from pulpits about mortal sin and eternal damnation, but thunder sounds different when your purse is empty and your stomach emptier. Our gravedigger hears these rumours while nursing his ale, feeling opportunity prickle his skin like grave dirt. The proposition tastes of profit and peril, a combination as familiar as mud under fingernails. These scholars, physicians they call themselves, claim to study the dead to better heal the living, a logic twisted enough to be either brilliant or blasphemous. They need bodies unmarked by decay, fresh as morning bread but considerably less appetizing. The gravedigger weighs the gold against his soul and finds the scales tipping toward commerce, as they often do when survival's at stake. His first venture into the resurrection trade begins on a moonless night, clouds considerately blocking heaven's view. The churchyard lies quiet as a secret. Even the usual night sounds muffled, as if nature itself prefers not to witness. A digger brings tools different from his usual kit: rope instead of rosary, crowbar instead of cross. The recently deceased Baron Fitzgerald rests in Plot 7, barely 12 hours in the ground, fresh enough to interest those who find fascination in the formerly living. The earth comes away easily, still loose from recent disturbance, like a secret eager to be told. Each shovelful feels different when you're digging up instead of down, reverse engineering a burial. The coffin appears, its wood still pale and unmarked by moisture, a temporary home about to lose its tenant. The Baron paid extra for oak and brass fittings, ironic considering he's about to be evicted. The lid resists at first, wood swollen with propriety and nails driven by righteousness. But crowbars care nothing for conscience, and soon the lid pops free with a sound like breaking promises. Baron Fitzgerald lies within, dressed in his finest clothes that he'll no longer need, hands folded in prayer that went unanswered. Death has painted him pale, but not yet corrupt, preserved like a letter never sent. Getting a body out proves harder than putting one in. Corpses are remarkably uncooperative about resurrection. The Baron's limbs have stiffened with rigor mortis, making him as flexible as iron and twice as heavy. Our gravedigger wraps him in sacking, creating a package that looks disturbingly like stolen goods, which technically it is. The hardest part isn't the lifting but the listening. Every sound seems amplified, every crow's caw an accusation. He loads his cargo onto a cart borrowed for the purpose, wheels muffled with rags to prevent telltale squeaking. The journey to the designated meeting spot leads through empty streets that feel full of watching eyes. Every shadow could hide a guard, every doorway a witness to his entrepreneurial expansion. The Baron shifts in his sacking, as if protesting this undignified treatment of nobility. The meeting place is a crossroads outside town, traditional for dealings both dark and dubious. A figure waits, hooded and mysterious as a confession booth secret. The surgeon examines the goods with professional interest, checking freshness like a fishmonger with questionable fish. Gold changes hands, heavy enough to make morality feel lightweight. Same time next week, the surgeon asks, his voice cultured but corrupted, like silk used to strangle. Our gravedigger nods, already calculating which recent burials might interest science more than scripture. The surgeon's gratitude sounds suspiciously like future blackmail, sweet words with bitter aftertaste. As the cart rolls away with its passenger, our digger pockets the gold and his conscience in equal measure. The problem with easy money is it's never as easy as advertised. Returning to the churchyard, he must now create an illusion of undisturbed rest. The grave needs refilling, but not with the Baron. That ship has literally sailed. Instead, he uses rocks wrapped in shrouds, buried deep enough to discourage casual inspection. Nighttime exhumations become a side business, with regular hours and irregular ethics. He develops a system. Recent deaths only, preferably those buried in simple ceremonies without too many witnesses. The poor make better candidates than the rich. Fewer mourners, fewer questions, fewer people checking on their eternal rest. It's discrimination that continues past death, proving some inequalities are truly eternal. He learns to read funerals differently now, evaluating corpses for their resale value. Young adults fetch the best prices, their organs still educational, and their deaths usually sudden. The elderly and disease-ridden interest the surgeons less, though sometimes they request specific ailments for study. Our gravedigger becomes a talent scout for the deceased, matching bodies to academic interests. The trick is rotating the thefts, never taking too many from one section. He swaps tombstones like playing cards, moving markers to hide gaps in the cemetery's population. Old Martha's headstone now marks an empty plot, while her body teaches anatomy in a city basement. The deception requires memory sharp as a scalpel. Forgetting who's actually where could lead to awkward exhumations. 3 weeks into his new career, complications arise, like corpses from shallow graves. Town guards have increased patrols, their lanterns swinging through darkness like pendulums of justice. Our gravedigger adapts, learning their routes with the dedication of a student studying for finals. Tuesday nights are safest, when the guards drink at the Boar's Head Tavern, their vigilance dissolved in ale. On one particularly close call, footsteps approach while he's mid-excavation. The grave yawns open like an accusation, too late to fill, too obvious to ignore. With the quick thinking of the professionally desperate, he drops into the grave himself. Pulling the displaced coffin lid over himself, he lies among the dead, holding his breath while contemplating employee benefits. The guards pass, their conversation drifting down like dirt. It smells worse than usual tonight. Everything smells worse since the plague. Even the living stink of death. Their laughter fades with their footsteps, leaving our gravedigger alone with his temporary roommate. He rises from the grave covered in death's perfume and grave dust, looking more corpse than resurrectionist. The experience gives him new appreciation for his merchandise. Being dead, even temporarily, is remarkably uncomfortable. He completes the extraction with shaking hands, wondering if this is what birth feels like from the baby's perspective. The corpse seems heavier after his underground interlude, as if death has added weight to mock him. The surgeon that week comments on the body's quality with the air of a wine connoisseur. Excellent preservation, he notes. Minimal putrefaction, organs intact. Our gravedigger nods as if he understands, though his medical knowledge extends only to dead and not dead yet. The surgeon pays extra for the quality, gold coins singing their amoral song. Word spreads in whispers among those who deal in society's shadows. Other gravediggers approach him, curious about his sudden prosperity in a profession not known for advancement. He remains vague, crediting luck and hard work, the universal lies of the secretly successful. But some guess the truth, their knowing looks worth more than accusations. The local priest, Father Benedict, recovered from his plague scare, sermonizes about grave robbing. His words paint pictures of hellfire specifically reserved for those who disturb the dead's rest. Our gravedigger sits in the back pew, noting that the promised flames of damnation at least sound warm. The congregation nods along, unaware their shepherd's flock is being selectively culled. One evening, a different kind of customer appears at the crossroads. This one wears no hood, his confidence needing no disguise. I represent certain interests, he says, which is how powerful people say criminal without criminalizing themselves. Your enterprise has attracted attention. Some might call it entrepreneurial, others might call it evidence. The threat hangs between them like a body on a gibbet. Our gravedigger recognizes a shakedown dressed in educated words. What do these interests interest themselves in, he asks, playing the game. Partnership, comes the reply. Protection for percentage, very reasonable rates for unreasonable work. And so his private business gains silent partners, men who've discovered that crime, like death, is best organized. They provide alibis and guard schedules, smooth words for rough justice. In exchange, they take their cut of profits, proving that even body snatching has a management structure. Our gravedigger accepts, because refusing would mean joining his merchandise permanently. The work continues now with corporate oversight. Bodies flow from sacred ground to secular study, a pipeline of education lubricated with gold. The surgeons grow bolder in their requests. Female, aged 20 to 30, preferably died in childbirth. Our gravedigger becomes a personal shopper for the posthumous, filling orders like a merchant of mortality. He develops professional pride in his selections, choosing bodies like a sommelier selects wine. This one has excellent bone structure, that one shows interesting scarification. He can tell at a glance which corpses will interest his clients, reading death like others read palms. It's a skill that pays well but weighs heavy, each talent a tally against his soul. The money accumulates faster than dirt under fingernails. He moves to better lodgings, pays debts, even saves some for the future he's not sure he'll have. His newfound wealth raises eyebrows but not questions. In times of plague and poverty, nobody interrogates good fortune too closely. The gold spends as well as any honest earnings, which is to say it spends without conscience. But success in grave robbing, like success in any field, breeds competition. Other enterprising individuals eye the cemetery's profits, calculating their own excavation economics. Our gravedigger finds disturbed graves he didn't disturb, empty plots he didn't empty. The market floods with corpses, driving prices down and danger up. One night, he arrives to find his target grave already opened, the body gone, only earthworms expressing surprise. Footprints in the mud tell of hurried work by amateur hands. He feels oddly offended. Grave robbing requires finesse, not just shovels and greed. These newcomers dig like they're planting potatoes, showing no respect for the craft. Competition leads to conflict, as it always does when profit meets poverty. Fights break out at crossroads, resurrection men arguing over territory and corpses. Our gravedigger avoids these confrontations, having learned that the living are more dangerous than the dead. He adjusts his schedule, works different sections, adapts like a successful parasite. The surgeons complain about quality control. Too many bodies arrive damaged by amateur handling. They prefer our gravedigger's professional touch, his bodies arriving intact and properly packaged. He's become a brand name in body snatching, a reputation he's not sure belongs on his eventual headstone. Here lies a man who disturbed the rest of others. Seems honest but hardly flattering. Winter arrives, making the work harder but the preservation better. Frozen ground resists shovels but refrigerates corpses. Nature's cold storage for science. Our gravedigger invests in better tools, sharper spades for harder soil. The physical challenge increases, but so does the quality of merchandise. He encounters a problem that would be funny if it weren't felonious. He accidentally sells the same body twice. A clerical error in his mental cemetery map leads to embarrassing emptiness when he goes to retrieve Mrs. Henderson. The surgeon is understanding but disappointed, like a customer finding his favourite dish sold out. Our gravedigger offers a discount on the next delivery, customer service extending even to criminal enterprise. The church installs new locks on cemetery gates, heavy iron that speaks of suspicion. But locks only work on those who don't have keys, and our gravedigger has made copies. Security theatre, he thinks, performance art for the fearful. The real security would be guards. But the town can't afford protection for the dead when the living need it more. As his first year in the body trade concludes, our gravedigger tallies profits against perdition. The gold is good, better than any honest gravedigger could earn. But the weight of it grows heavier, each coin a small headstone in his conscience. He's rich in currency but bankrupt in blessings, a wealthy man with a poor soul. Yet he continues, because stopping would mean returning to simple poverty. And he's tasted the fruit of forbidden commerce, found it profitable if not sweet. The bodies keep coming, death's supply chain unbroken by moral qualms. He's become middle management in mortality's darker departments. One foggy evening, while negotiating with a new surgeon, the man makes an observation. You know, your work advances medical knowledge. These bodies teach us to save the living. Our gravedigger nods, filing this under things criminals tell themselves. But part of him wonders if there's truth in it, if his sins serve some greater good. The surgeon continues, before we had bodies to study, we knew nothing of anatomy but guesswork. Physicians killed more than they cured, bleeding patients who needed their blood. Your work, distasteful as it is, lights candles in medicine's darkness. Pretty words for ugly work, but our gravedigger pockets them along with the gold. He walks home through empty streets, past houses marked with plague signs. Inside those homes, people die of ignorance as much as illness. Maybe the surgeon's right. Maybe stolen bodies teach lessons that save lives. Or maybe that's just the rationalization of a man who's made his peace with pieces. Arriving home, he counts his earnings by candlelight, gold reflecting flames like tiny suns. Each coin purchased with someone's eternal rest, a currency exchange between death and education. He's become a banker of bodies, an investor in the illegal education market. Tomorrow he'll return to the cemetery, shovel in hand, conscience in pocket. The gravedigger's life has split like a poorly dug grave, respectable citizen by day, resurrectionist by night. He attends church, nods to neighbours, maintains the fiction of honest employment. But after dark he harvests the dead like a farmer with an unusual crop. It's a double life that doubles his income but halves his honesty. As he prepares for sleep, he wonders what his own body will be worth when his time comes. Will some future gravedigger eye his corpse with professional interest? The thought should disturb him more than it does, but familiarity breeds acceptance. He's made death his business in more ways than one, a vertical integration of the funeral industry. The church bells toll midnight, marking another day survived in a career that shouldn't exist. Our gravedigger closes his eyes, knowing tomorrow brings more bodies, more gold, more gradual damnation. But for tonight, he's warm, fed, and wealthy, even if his dreams smell of disturbed earth. In a world where honest work barely feeds you, dishonest work at least pays the bills. He sleeps, and if he dreams of empty graves and angry corpses, well, that's just professional development. The morning will bring fresh deaths and fresh opportunities. The cycle continues, as reliable as resurrection and twice as profitable. Our gravedigger has found his calling in the uncalling of the dead, a career counselor's nightmare but an economist's case study. And somewhere in the city a medical student cuts into stolen flesh, learning to heal by studying the illegally dead. The knowledge flows from grave to table to textbook, a river of understanding fed by criminal springs. Our gravedigger is just one link in this chain of irregular education. But he's a link that profits, and in the end that's what matters to a man who's learnt that morality is a luxury the poor can't afford. Repeated exposure to death breeds familiarity, and familiarity breeds curiosity in minds not completely numbed by routine. Our gravedigger, having handled more corpses than a small war produces, begins to notice patterns in the pale tapestry of mortality. The dead, he realizes, tell stories with their silence, writing final chapters in the language of lesions and lividity. He starts cataloguing the colours of rot, the way poets collect sunsets, finding beauty in decay's rainbow. Green is the colour of beginnings, when bacteria throw their first party in the body's abandoned nightclub. It starts at the belly, spreading like gossip through tissue that can no longer defend itself. Purple follows, pooling in the body's low places, where blood settles like sediment in wine. Our gravedigger notes these changes with the detachment of a man who's seen too much to be shocked by colour. The buboes of plague victims fascinate him with their grotesque consistency. They appear in the same places, like appointments kept by death: neck, armpit, groin. Black as burnt bread, swollen as a merchant's purse, they mark their victims with disease's signature. He begins to predict where they'll appear on new arrivals, a parlour trick nobody wants to see performed. Working with bodies teaches lessons no university offers. He notices that some corpses smell of bitter almonds, sweet death, wrapped in nutty fragrance. These bodies arrive suddenly, dead, often from wealthy houses where inheritance disputes run hot. Future physicians will name this calling card of cyanide, but our gravedigger simply calls it bad almonds, and notes which families favour this particular recipe. The colour of skin tells tales too, if you know the dialect of death. Cherry red suggests smoke inhalation, common in winter when families seal themselves in with their fires. Yellow speaks of liver failure, the drunkard's rainbow painting itself on skin. Blue lips whisper of suffocation, though whether by pillow or providence remains unspoken. He develops a mental catalogue more detailed than any medical text. This shade of purple means quick death, that shade means lingering. Foam at the mouth suggests poison or seizure. Blood from the ear speaks of head trauma disguised as natural causes. His untrained eye becomes expert through repetition, education by excavation. The position of bodies teaches him about death's choreography. Those who die peacefully lie straight, hands folded as if practicing for their funeral pose. Violent deaths leave bodies twisted, limbs akimbo, like dancers, frozen mid-stumble. Suicides often clutch things: ropes, empty vials, farewell notes written in shaky hands. Winter brings its own lessons written in frozen flesh. He learns that cold preserves bodies like nature's mortuary, keeping them fresh for his side business. But it also makes them brittle, prone to snapping at joints like poorly made dolls. Frostbite paints extremities black, death's makeup applied by weather's cruel hand. Summer teaches opposite lessons in accelerated decay. Heat turns bodies into bloated parodies of their living selves, swollen with gases that escape at inconvenient moments. Maggots appear with the punctuality of tax collectors, beginning their work at every available opening. He times their arrival like a natural clock. First day, eggs; third day, movement. By week's end, the body crawls with life feeding on death. One evening, while preparing a body for its illicit journey, he notices something odd. The deceased, a young woman reportedly dead of female troubles, shows no signs of disease. Instead, bruises ring her throat like a purple necklace, fingerprints preserved in flesh. He makes a mental note: another victim of sudden illness that looks suspiciously like strangulation. This knowledge sits heavy as wet earth in his mind. He sees murder disguised as misfortune, poison dressed as plague. But who would listen to a gravedigger's observations? His testimony would be dismissed like dirt from a shovel. Still, he remembers faces, names, patterns of family deaths that follow suspicious sequences. The village midwives become his unexpected students. They approach him quietly, seeking knowledge about the bodies of women who died in childbirth. He shows them the signs: bleeding patterns that suggest what went wrong, positions that indicate breech births. Together they conduct crude autopsies by lantern light, learning from the dead how to save the living. Old Martha, the midwife, proves particularly eager to learn. She brings him bread and questions, payment for lessons in posthumous diagnosis. "Show me," she says, "what killed the baker's wife. I attended that birth, and something weren't natural." He demonstrates how the bleeding pattern indicates a tear inside, not the external hemorrhage they tried to stop. Word spreads in whispers among the women who attend births and deaths. They come to him with questions disguised as gossip, seeking understanding wrapped in casual conversation. He teaches them to read the body's final story, though none admit to these midnight lessons. The knowledge spreads like beneficial plague. saving lives through understanding gained from the dead. His accidental medical education expands with each corpse. He notices that certain wounds heal partially even after death, suggesting the person lived longer than claimed. Some bodies show signs of long illness despite families insisting on sudden demise. The dead contradict the living with evidence written in flesh and bone. A merchant arrives one day, dead of apoplexy, according to his widow. But the body tells different tales. Needle marks between the toes, the hidden highway of habitual users. The skin shows the yellowish tinge of poppy addiction, death by recreational mathematics. Our gravedigger notes this but says nothing, filing it with other secrets the cemetery keeps. He begins to predict death's arrival in the living. That peculiar smell that precedes death by days. Sweet rot announcing itself before visible symptoms. The particular pallor that creeps across features like slow frost, marking those who stand at death's threshold. He sees it in the tavern, the market, even in church where people pray for health while wearing death's preview. Children with certain rashes will be dead within the week, he knows. Adults who develop that specific cough, wet and rattling like dice in a cup, have months at most. The way skin loses its elasticity, tenting when pinched, signals the body's surrender to whatever battle it's fighting. He keeps these observations to himself mostly, though sometimes he'll quietly suggest someone get their affairs in order. The plague taught him that disease has personality. Some illnesses kill quick and clean like efficient murderers. Others toy with their victims, advancing and retreating like cats with wounded mice. He can tell by looking at a corpse which disease claimed it, reading symptoms like signatures. A strange case arrives, a child dead of convulsions, the third in the family this year. The pattern strikes him as significant, especially since all three showed the same symptoms. White powder clings to the corner of the youngest's mouth, and he tastes it carefully. Lead powder, sweet as sugar and twice as deadly. Someone's been seasoning the children's food. He shares this discovery with the midwife Martha, who shares it with the constable's wife, who shares it with her husband. The information travels through unofficial channels, women's whispers carrying more weight than formal accusations. Within a week, the children's stepmother develops a sudden desire to visit distant relatives. She leaves at night and doesn't return, which the gravedigger counts as a life saved through death observed. His fingernails become permanently stained with soil and secrets. Each line of dirt represents another body's story, another lesson in mortality's textbook. He's become a library of the dead, cataloguing their final chapters with unconscious expertise. The knowledge accumulates like sediment, layer upon layer of understanding built on bodies. Local physicians begin to notice his insights, though they'd never admit it. They linger at funerals, casually asking about symptoms they happen to observe. He answers with the same calculated casualness, playing the game of pride and prejudice. Information exchanges hands like contraband, valuable despite its questionable source. One young physician, less proud than practical, approaches him directly. "I've heard you notice things," the man says, nervous as a grave robber, about the dead, things that might help the living. Our gravedigger recognizes opportunity dressed in curiosity. They develop an arrangement. The physician brings questions, the gravedigger provides observations. Payment comes in medical texts, borrowed briefly, which our digger studies by candlelight. He learns the formal names for things he's observed: putrefaction, adipocere, livor mortis. Latin labels for phenomena he knows intimately, like meeting a long-time lover's official family. The books reveal that his observations align with emerging medical thought. Physicians in great cities are cutting open bodies legally, finding what he's noticed through repetition. His accidental education matches their intentional investigation. The only difference is their corpses come with permission, and his come with payment. He begins keeping notes, though carefully coded. Mrs. H, purple neck ring, Tuesday burial, husband remarried Thursday, tells a story without spelling it out. Child M, sweet mouth, 3 siblings previous, stepmother, nervous, documents suspicion. His journal becomes a cemetery census, recording more than names and dates. The patterns he documents would make lawyers weep and criminals sweat. Certain families lose members with suspicious regularity, especially wealthy elders with impatient heirs. Some deaths cluster around financial disputes with the timing of calculated coincidence. His graveyard holds more murder victims than the official records suggest, each one documented in dirt and memory. Winter brings a wave of deaths from chest congestion, but he notices differences. Some bodies show true pneumonia signs, fluid in lungs, fevered faces even in death. Others display what he calls pillow chests, suffocation disguised as natural causes. The old and infirm die more often on cold nights, when no one would question another natural death. He shares these observations carefully, strategically. A word to the midwife about checking on elderly patients during cold snaps. A hint to the constable about which deaths deserve closer examination. Seeds of suspicion planted in fertile minds growing into protective vigilance. The knowledge burdens him like extra weight in his shovel. Everybody tells its story, but not all stories should be heard. Some secrets are safer buried, especially when the living killers have gold and influence. He learns to balance truth with survival, becoming a selective narrator of the dead's tales. His reputation spreads through the underground networks of those who deal with death. Midwives, nurses, even some progressive priests seek his counsel. They come with questions about patterns, symptoms, signs. He's become an unofficial coroner, investigating without authority, but with expertise. A peculiar case presents itself. A string of deaths among young men who frequent a particular tavern. All die of sudden illness, but all show the same symptoms, paralysis starting in the legs. He investigates quietly, noting they all drank from the same barrel of special brew. The tavern keeper's wife, he discovers, has been adding hemlock to her husband's reserve, not realizing others sampled it. This information he shares directly with authorities, framing it as concern rather than accusation. The barrel is tested, found tainted, the wife questioned. She confesses to attempted murder, surprised that her targeted poison found other victims. Several lives are saved by his observation, though he receives no official credit. His hands have become textbooks, written in calluses and scars. Each line tells of knowledge gained through grave soil, every mark a lesson learned. He reads palms now, but only his own, seeing in them the history of 1,000 deaths. The living consult fortune tellers. He's become a past teller, reading what was rather than what will be. The physician brings more books, hungry for the gravedigger's observations. Together they develop a crude classification system for deaths. Natural, suspicious, violent, disease, categories that will echo in future bureaucracy. They're inventing forensics without knowing the word, creating science from cemetery statistics. One night, while examining a particularly puzzling corpse, he has an epiphany. The body shows signs of rabies, the foam, the contorted features, the bite marks. But the family insist the man died of brain fever, fearing the stigma of mad dog disease. He realizes that shame kills truth as surely as disease kills bodies. He begins documenting not just how people died, but how people lie about death. The patterns of deception prove as educational as the patterns of disease. Families hide suicide, disguise murder, deny contagion. Each lie leaves its own signature, readable to those who know death's alphabet. His accidental education has made him accidentally essential. The midnight consultations increase, bringing payment in knowledge and coin. He's become a bridge between the dead's truth and the living's need to know. A translator, working in the language of mortality, teaching others to read death's dictionary. The gravedigger reflects on his transformation with bitter amusement. He started as a simple hole digger, graduated to body snatcher, and emerged as death scholar. His university was the cemetery, his professors the corpses. No degree decorates his wall, but his expertise surpasses many who claim the title doctor. As dawn breaks over another night of educational exhumation, he heads home. His notebook weighs heavy in his pocket, filled with observations that could save lives or end them. Knowledge, he's learned, is like a sharp spade, useful for digging but dangerous if mishandled. He's become curator of a morbid museum, cataloguing exhibits no one wants to see, but everyone needs to understand. The church bells toll, calling the living to prayer. He wonders how many of those who answer will soon be his subjects. How many carry death's early signatures, invisible to all but those who've learned to read them? His education continues with each burial, each body a new page in death's encyclopedia. Tomorrow brings fresh corpses and fresh lessons. He'll read their stories in rot and rigour, translating death for the living's benefit. His accidental pathology practice thrives in the shadows between official medicine and cemetery soil. The gravedigger has become a professor in the University of the Underground, teaching classes no one admits to attending. And in the growing light he sees his own reflection in a puddle. Tired, dirty, but oddly enlightened. He's learned more from the dead than most learn from the living. His education cost him innocence, but paid in understanding. The graves keep their secrets, but they share them with those who know how to listen. He reaches his door as the town wakes, unaware their gravedigger has spent the night advancing medical knowledge. They see only a dirty man with a shovel, not the accidental scientist he's become. But their ignorance is his protection, allowing him to continue his dark education. In a world where knowledge is power, he's become powerful in the most powerless profession. Sleep comes, bringing dreams of bodies that speak in symptoms. Even in rest, his mind catalogues and categorizes, building understanding from unconscious observation. He's become what he never intended, a scholar of the deceased, a professor of putrefaction. His classroom is 6 feet under, but the lessons rise to the surface. Word spreads through the village, like water finding cracks in stone, seeping into conversations and eroding old certainties. Disease favours filth, not demons, a radical notion that makes priests frown and housewives think. Our gravedigger watches this change in understanding with the satisfaction of a man who's been accidentally right. Baths, those long-shunned harbours of sin and nakedness, creep back into fashion like prodigal children returning home. The transformation happens quietly, under cover of practicality rather than philosophy. Goodwife Harrison starts boiling water not for cooking but for washing, though she claims it's for her complexion. The baker begins covering his bread, explaining it keeps flies away, not mentioning he's also noticed fewer customers falling ill. Cleanliness becomes a conspiracy of the converted, each practitioner pretending independent discovery. Our gravedigger's tales reach unexpected ears through the village's informal networks. His observations about correlation between filth and fever spread from tavern to market to household. Women whisper his findings while washing laundry, each repetition adding authority to accident. What started as graveyard gossip transforms into grandmother wisdom. A wandering barber surgeon arrives in town, following rumours of unusual medical insights. He's young, eager, with ink-stained fingers and questions sharp as his razors. "I've heard," he says carefully to our gravedigger, "that someone here reads bodies like books." The gravedigger recognises ambition dressed in curiosity, but ambition that might serve truth. They meet after dark in the churchyard, appropriately enough. The barber surgeon, who insists his name is Marcus despite his obvious foreign accent, brings writing materials. "Tell me," he says, quill poised like a scalpel, "about the patterns you've seen." Our gravedigger obliges, sharing observations while Marcus scratches notes on cured hide. The hide fills with drawings and descriptions, a grotesque gallery of death's calling cards. Marcus sketches the placement of plague buboes with artistic precision. He documents the colour progression of decomposition, like a painter mixing palettes. Each observation transforms from graveyard anecdote to proto-scientific record. In Padua, Marcus confides, they cut open bodies in the university, legally. His eyes shine with the fervour of someone who's seen the future. BMI map the organs, trace the blood's pathways, understand the machine of man. Our gravedigger nods, thinking of his own midnight dissections, less legal but equally educational. Parish elders scoff when Marcus suggests that bad air isn't divine punishment but natural phenomenon. They quote scripture while he quotes observation, a battle between faith and empiricism. Father Benedict leads the charge against these heretical notions, thundering from the pulpit. But thunder sounds hollow when the bishop's own nephew dies, exactly as the gravedigger predicted. The boy had shown all the signs, the sweet breath, the particular rash, the progressive weakness. The gravedigger had quietly suggested to Marcus that perhaps the bishop should prepare. Marcus had passed the warning along, couched in medical terminology. When death arrived on schedule, even the bishop began to wonder if God worked through patterns. The first official dissection happens by accident, or at least that's the story they tell. A body arrives so mangled from a cart accident that burial seems impossible without reconstruction. Marcus volunteers to prepare the corpse, and our gravedigger assists. What starts as necessity becomes education, as they explore the body's architecture. Inside the church basement, by candlelight, they conduct their clandestine anatomy lesson. The gravedigger points out oddities he's noticed, how certain organs change colour with different diseases. Marcus documents everything, creating a map of mortality's effects on human geography. They work with the reverence of those who know they're trespassing on sacred ground. Look here, the gravedigger indicates. The liver of a drunkard versus plague victim. Marcus compares, notes differences, builds understanding from observation. They discover that worms don't spontaneously generate from sin, but arrive from eggs. The revelation seems obvious in retrospect, like all good science. Word of their work spreads, despite their precautions. Some condemn it as blasphemy, but others come seeking knowledge. A mother wants to know what really killed her child, not satisfied with God's will as diagnosis. A merchant asks about the signs of poison, having suspicions about a rival's sudden death. The gravedigger becomes translator between Marcus's Latin learning and local language. He explains that miasma just means bad air, not divine displeasure. That contagion describes sickness spreading person to person, not punishment passing sinner to sinner. Language changes thought, and thought changes behaviour. Bathing becomes more common, though still conducted with furtive privacy. The public bathhouse, closed since plague times, reopens under new management. The proprietor, claiming divine inspiration, insists on regular water changes. Cleanliness creeps into respectability, wearing the disguise of godliness. The midwives organise, sharing the gravedigger's observations about childbirth deaths. They develop protocols based on patterns, washing hands between patients, boiling tools. The death rate among new mothers drops, though they credit prayer rather than practice. Success needs no explanation when lives are saved. Marcus documents everything in his growing collection of hides and parchments. He's creating a textbook written in grave dirt and practical wisdom. This will revolutionize medicine, he insists with youth's optimism. The gravedigger, older and wiser, knows revolution happens slowly, one clean hand at a time. Resistance comes from unexpected quarters. The local barber, threatened by Marcus's success, spreads rumours of witchcraft. The apothecary, seeing his poisonous potions questioned, funds sermons against newfangled notions. Progress threatens profit, and profit fights back with prehistoric vigour. But evidence accumulates, like bodies in plague time, too numerous to ignore. Families that adopt cleaning practices lose fewer members to disease. Midwives who follow the new protocol see more mothers survive. Even skeptics notice that cleaner streets correlate with fewer deaths. The gravedigger watches this transformation with bemused satisfaction. His accidental observations, born from handling too many bodies, spark intentional change. He's become an unwitting revolutionary, overthrowing superstition with a shovel. Each grave he digs now might prevent 2 future ones. A delegation from the city arrives, having heard of the town's medical advances. They interview Marcus, who credits local wisdom without naming the gravedigger. The delegation leaves, impressed, carrying ideas that will spread like beneficial plague. Our gravedigger remains anonymous, which suits him perfectly. The church adapts with surprising flexibility, reframing cleanliness as next to godliness. Father Benedict, recovered from his nephew's death, preaches about the body as temple. If God's house should be kept clean, why not God's creation? Theology bends to accommodate reality, as it always does when survival's at stake. Children grow up in this changing world, accepting new ideas as natural. They wash their hands without thinking it strange, cover food without questioning why. What seems revolutionary to their parents becomes routine to them. The gravedigger realizes he's watching evolution in real time, ideas adapting to survive. His own role evolves too, from observer to educator to catalyst. People seek his opinion on health matters, though always discreetly. He's become the town's unofficial health inspector, noting problems before they become epidemics. His grave-digging work decreases as his prevention work succeeds. Marcus prepares to leave, his hides full of observations, his mission accomplished. "Come with me," he offers the gravedigger. "Your knowledge deserves wider audience." But our digger declines, knowing his place is here, among the graves that taught him. He's a local phenomenon, like a healing spring or haunted tree. On Marcus's last night, they share ale in the tavern, now notably cleaner than before. "You've changed the world," Marcus says, melodramatic with youth and alcohol. "I've changed a village," the gravedigger corrects. "The world changes itself." They toast to small revolutions, the kind that save lives without fanfare. The next morning, Marcus leaves with his precious documents. The gravedigger watches him go, knowing those notes will become lectures, books, policies. His observations will echo in universities he'll never see, save lives he'll never know. It's a kind of immortality, purchased with mortality's currency. The town settles into its new normal, cleaner but still recognizable. People still die. The gravedigger still has work, but less often and less mysteriously. Disease becomes something to fight with soap and sense, not just prayer and acceptance. The supernatural retreats as the natural advances, inch by practical inch. Old Marta the midwife brings him bread, as she has for years. "My grandson wants to be a physician," she says proudly. Says he wants to understand how bodies work, how to fix them. The gravedigger smiles, seeing his influence ripple through generations. That night, he walks through the churchyard, past graves of people who died from ignorance. Their deaths taught lessons that now save their descendants. Each headstone marks not just an ending, but a data point in humanity's slow education. The cemetery has become a university, teaching through negative example. He pauses at William's grave, his young assistant who died in the plague times. Would the boy have lived if they'd known then what they know now? Perhaps not. Plague is persistent, but perhaps yes. Knowledge can't resurrect the dead, but it can prevent future graves. The church bells toll, not for death this time, but for evening prayer. The sound carries across a town, transforming itself through small acts of cleanliness. Superstition erodes like old headstones, worn away by the persistent rain of reason. Our gravedigger heads home, knowing tomorrow brings new lessons from the dead. His work continues, but its nature has changed. He's no longer just burying bodies, but burying ignorance. Each observation shared, each pattern recognized, chips away at deadly superstition. He's become archaeology in reverse, digging up the future from the past's graves. The moon rises over the churchyard, illuminating headstones and progress equally. In the silver light, the cemetery looks almost peaceful, even educational. Tomorrow someone will die, but perhaps fewer than yesterday. That's progress, measured in empty graves and living children. The gravedigger sleeps, dreaming of clean water and careful observation. His revolution requires no violence, only vigilance. Change comes not with swords but with soap, not with sermons but with seeing. And in the morning, he'll continue his work, one grave and one truth at a time. Centuries spin past like pages in a medical textbook, each generation adding chapters to the story our gravedigger began. The antiseptic wards of modern hospitals glow white as old bones, their cleanliness a testament to lessons learned in medieval mud. Fluorescent lights replace candles, but the pursuit of understanding death to prevent it remains unchanged. The lineage of modern medicine traces back through time like a genealogy of graves, finding its roots in churchyards and the observations of those who worked them. In a teaching hospital in London, Berlin or Boston, medical students gather around a cadaver. Their instructor, dressed in surgical scrubs instead of grave dirt, begins the lesson. "Before we could legally study anatomy," she says, "knowledge came from those who handled the dead." The students, young and eager as Marcus the barber surgeon once was, lean in to learn. The corpse on the table arrived through proper channels. Donation forms signed, consent given. No midnight resurrection required. No bribes exchanged in foggy crossroads. Yet the knowledge these students gain echoes discoveries made by candlelight in cemetery soil. Every incision follows paths first traced by desperate curiosity and illegal enterprise. The instructor points out the liver, explaining cirrhosis with clinical detachment. Our gravedigger would recognize the condition, though he called it drunkard's curse. The color, the texture, the telltale signs remain constant across centuries. Only the language has evolved, Latin replacing the crude but accurate observations of unschooled eyes. Historians debate in academic journals, their footnotes heavy with speculation. Who were these early observers who noticed patterns in death before science gave them names? They search records for evidence of proto-pathologists, finding hints in burial records and church documents. Our gravedigger appears in their research as shadows and suggestions, never named but always present. The Leicester gravedigger, one paper calls him, based on payment records showing unusual prosperity. The animist of St Mary's churchyard, another suggests, noting the correlation between his work and medical advancement. They assign him titles he never claimed, importance he never sought. His legacy lives in their speculation, a ghost haunting medical history. Medical students nickname cadaver donors diggers' heirs, a joke with archaeological accuracy. The tradition of learning from the dead, started in desperation, continues in dedication. Each body teaches as our gravediggers' stolen corpses once did, though now with permission. The ethics have evolved, but the education remains rooted in mortality. In pathology labs, technicians prepare samples with techniques refined from crude beginnings. They stain tissues to reveal disease, using methods that echo the gravedigger's observation of color changes. The sweet smell of certain poisons, the particular hue of specific infections, all catalogued now in proper textbooks. But first noticed by those who had no textbooks, only bodies and curiosity. Public health policies cite medieval burial ordinances in their historical sections. The rules about quick burial during plague times, the separation of infected bodies, primitive but effective. Modern pandemic plans echo these ancient practices, updated with current science but recognizing old wisdom. Our gravediggers' emergency procedures became templates for contemporary crisis management. A medical examiner in New York reviews a suspicious death, checking for signs of foul play. She looks for the same tells our gravedigger noted: bruising patterns, poison indicators, evidence of suffocation. Her tools are more sophisticated, mass spectrometers instead of taste tests, but the observation skills remain unchanged. She's his professional descendant, reading death story with trained eyes. In university libraries, medieval manuscripts preserved on microfilm reveal marginal notes. Bodies near tannery show particular lung damage, one notation reads. Children who eat from pewter dishes display similar symptoms, observes another. These anonymous observations predate formal environmental medicine by centuries. The World Health Organization tracks disease patterns using computer models and satellite data. Yet their fundamental approach, observing, recording, finding patterns, mirrors the gravedigger's journal. Scale has changed from village to global, but the methodology remains. Pattern recognition, whether in graveyard or gigabytes, drives prevention. Forensic anthropologists unearth old cemeteries, studying historical death patterns. They find evidence of the gravedigger's observations in the bones themselves. Nutritional deficiencies, environmental poisonings, violence disguised as natural death, all preserved in calcium. His informal investigations now fuel formal research into historical health. In medical ethics classes, professors discuss the body snatchers with careful nuance. Their methods were wrong, the professor explains, but their contributions undeniable. Students debate the balance between advancing knowledge and respecting the dead. The gravedigger's moral compromises become case studies in ethical evolution. Modern funeral directors follow regulations born from medieval necessity. Burial depth, casket requirements, embalming practices, all echo lessons learned through tragedy. The gravedigger's practical knowledge, hard-won through plague and error, shapes contemporary death care. His profession has professionalized, but the fundamental service remains. Epidemiologists studying historical pandemics reference burial records for data. Spikes in deaths, clusters of symptoms, patterns of spread. all preserved in cemetery statistics. Our gravediggers' informal census becomes crucial evidence for understanding disease evolution. His record-keeping, motivated by commerce, serves science centuries later. In developing nations, community health workers share knowledge in ways the gravedigger would recognize. They translate medical concepts into local language, making science accessible. Like him explaining Marx's Latin to villagers, they bridge education gaps. The tradition of practical knowledge shared freely continues worldwide. Medical schools now require humanities courses, recognizing that medicine involves more than memorizing anatomy. Students read histories of healing, including accounts of irregular practitioners. The gravedigger appears in these narratives, unnamed but influential. His story teaches that knowledge comes from unexpected sources. Infection control procedures in hospitals follow protocols that would amuse and vindicate our gravedigger. Hand washing between patients, equipment sterilization, isolation of infectious cases, all standard now. What seemed radical when midwives first tried it has become so routine it's monitored by computer. Progress measured in compliance percentages rather than cemetery expansion. A young resident, exhausted after a 30-hour shift, makes rounds in the teaching hospital. She checks symptoms, notes patterns, adjusts treatments based on observation. Her approach, systematic and scientific, builds on foundations laid in churchyard soil. Every patient saved represents victory over ignorance that once filled graves. The morgue attendant, working night shift, processes bodies with professional detachment. Like the gravedigger, he's become intimate with death, seeing patterns others miss. His observations, properly channeled, contribute to medical knowledge. The profession has evolved, but the fundamental relationship with mortality remains. Research laboratories around the world work on diseases the gravedigger knew well. Plague, now treatable with antibiotics, still demands respect and study. The buboes he catalogued appear in textbook photographs, symptoms unchanged across centuries. Modern medicine has answers to questions he could only ask. In war zones and disaster areas, emergency burial procedures follow ancient wisdom. Quick interment, mass graves when necessary, lime for disease control, all echo medieval practices. The gravedigger's crisis management, born from plague necessity, guides contemporary catastrophe response. Some lessons, once learnt, never lose relevance. Public health campaigns promoting hygiene would delight the midwives who first tried washing hands. Billboards advertise what they discovered through deadly trial and error. Wash your hands, save lives. A message that took centuries to become obvious. The gravedigger's observations about filth and fever now reach billions. As midnight approaches in our modern medical center, the night shift continues the ancient work. Observing symptoms, recording patterns, learning from the body's failures to prevent future ones. The tools have evolved, MRI machines instead of shovels, but the mission remains constant. Understanding death to serve life. The gravedigger's accidental calling made intentional. The narrator, having traced this long arc from medieval cemetery to modern hospital, prepares to close. The story that began with one man, a shovel, and too many bodies to bury properly, reaches its end. Or rather, it continues in every medical student who learns from the dead. In every public health policy that prevents rather than just treats disease. The gravedigger's legacy lives not in monuments, but in empty hospital beds. In children who survive diseases that once filled churchyards. In knowledge that flows from generation to generation, refined and expanded, but never forgetting its muddy origins. He dug graves, but he also excavated understanding from ignorance. Modern medicine, for all its technology and terminology, stands on foundations of earth and observation. Every gleaming scalpel connects to rusty spates through the continuum of human curiosity. The antiseptic ward and the plague pit are points on the same journey toward comprehension. Our gravedigger, unnamed and unremembered specifically, lives on in every life saved by knowledge he helped unearth. The fluorescent lights dim in the hospital corridor as somewhere a heart monitor beeps steadily. A patient sleeps, recovering from surgery that would have meant certain death in the gravedigger's time. The antibiotics flowing through their IV trace their ancestry to observations about infection and spread. Medicine's family tree has roots in cemetery soil. And so we end where we began, with death teaching lessons about life. The gravedigger's story, dark and sometimes disturbing, illuminates the path from superstition to science. His hands, dirty from honest work and dishonest enterprise, helped clean the way for modern healing. From grave to graduating medical class, the journey continues. Good night. Sleep well, dear listener. May your dreams stay above ground in the clean, well-lit spaces of modern medicine. But remember, as you drift off, that those spaces exist because someone once dug in the dark. The gravedigger's tale is complete, but his work continues in every hospital, every clinic, every hand washed in prevention rather than prayer alone. Rest peacefully, knowing that the graves grow fewer as the knowledge grows greater. The cemetery sleeps too, its lessons learned, its darkness illuminating the path forward. Tomorrow, the sun will rise on a world where death is understood well enough to be delayed. And somewhere, the echo of a shovel striking earth reminds us where that understanding began. Brutal history for sleep, the gravedigger's tale. Thank you for listening, one last time. May your sleep be deep, your dreams quiet, and your mind at peace. Good night.